Hello, music fans. I found this article on Loudwire here called The History of Prog Metal in 21 Albums. So I wanted to film a quick reaction to it without really anything prepared. I see Between the Buried and Me Colors, an album that I love here, so that's good. Diablo Swing Orchestra, Images and Word by Dream Theater, awesome one, and King Crimson's Red. So I already think there's going to be some awesome albums on this list, but let's see what Loudwire has picked here. All right, so I think they're going to go in chronological order because here we've got King Crimson Red from 1974. Now, I don't know if this is really a metal album. I'd say it's progressive rock, but it's definitely got some metal influence to it. And King Crimson even had that from the very beginning, even with their 1969 debut album In the Court of the Crimson King and the song 21st Century Schizoid Man. That's kind of almost like a proto metal song on a prog rock album. It's pretty heavy. So I think they're a good band to kind of start with on the history of prog metal. If it was a song, I would say you could even start with 21st Century Schizoid Man. Oh yeah, they mentioned that. They foreshadowed progressive metal on 21st Century Schizoid Man and Lark's Tongues and Aspic Part 2. Yeah, very cool. Good pick. Next one, they have Fate's Warning with Awaken the Guardian. Yeah, you have to have Fate's Warning on here if it's the history of progressive metal. This isn't their first album. As they mentioned, they've released The Spectre Within before this one. And then Watchtower released Energetic Disassembly. But this is, 1980s prog metal and kind of how it starts. Next up, we've got Queensryche with Operation Mindcrime. Yeah, I think this is Queensryche's best album. And in fact, a lot of their albums since this time have been kind of lame. They have some good ones and some kind of crappy ones, but this is definitely their best for me. It's a concept album, good, perfect example of the history of prog metal. Then we have Voivod with Nothing Face. Yeah, this is great, quirky, progressive thrash metal. Probably might be my favorite album of 1989. So I think it's a good pick. Then you have to have this one on here. Dream Theater's breakout album, Images and Words. Of course, it's not their first album, it's their second. Their first album, When Dream and Day Unite, had a different singer and wasn't as commercially successful. This had the big hit Pull Me Under that made them big, and it kind of defined their sound and brought in James LaBrie on vocals. So it's a good pick for this list. So far, I'm impressed by this list from Loudwire. They don't always make good lists, but sometimes they do. Next, we have Cynic with Focus, another great album. This is more on the technical death metal side of progressive metal. They've merged death metal and jazz fusion, avant-garde stuff. Yeah, they got that right. Then we have Arion with The Final Experiment. Yeah, great one. Great Dutch band formed by Arjen Lucassen. And it's almost like all of his stuff is almost like musical theater mixed with prog metal rock operas. So definitely have to include something from him on the list. Ooh, then we have a cool one. Orphan Land with El Nora Alila. This is an Israeli progressive death metal band. They have they combine folk influences, Middle Eastern folk stuff. This isn't my favorite album by them. I like the couple that came a bit later, but this is still kind of where they laid the groundwork for their sound, and it's a really cool album. And they have Meshuggah with Chaosphere. Again, not my favorite album by Meshuggah. I like some of the stuff that came a tad later, a bit better, but this is pretty cool, and it's they pretty much they invented the genre of djent. So this is pretty cool. It's not their debut album either, though. They had some albums before this. Here's one that I haven't heard though. Puya Fundamental. I have not heard this. Puerto Rican. Okay. Um, Stirred together thrash, heavy metal, Latin jazz, fusion, funk, salsa, and hip hop. Interesting. Maybe I'll have to listen to this someday. I haven't heard it, so I'm not sure if it's warranted to be on the list of progressive metal history in 21 albums, but it sounds cool to me, so maybe I'll check it out. Here's a good one. Pain of Salvation, The Perfect Element, Part 1. I love Pain of Salvation. They should be on the list for sure. This isn't my favorite album by them, but it's still a pretty solid one. Yeah. Next, Opeth Blackwater Park. Yeah, that's a perfect one to be on the list. Possibly the poster child for progressive death metal albums. Really, really awesome album. Love it. Production of Steven Wilson on here, so makes sense to put it on a prog list as well. Then we have Tool with Lateralis. Yep, that's a great one as well. Love everything by Tool, and they have to be on the list for sure. Here's a weird one. Nightwish with Once. I don't know, is this really prog metal or are they more like symphonic metal? I didn't I don't really consider this prog metal. It's fine. Very operatic female vocals here. Pretty cool album, but I'm sure I could find a better one to put on the list that's more in line with the history and evolution of prog metal because I think this kind of steps outside. Riverside with Second Life Syndrome is next. Yeah, I like Riverside. I got into them about a year ago and binged their entire discography, and I like everything they do. This seems like a good pick. They're not the most metal on this list, but there's a bit of sprinkling of metal and rock in with their prog. Here's a great one. Colors by Between the Buried and Me, my favorite one on the list so far. From 2007, my favorite Between the Buried and Me album. Blur the lines between metalcore, progressive death metal, jazz fusion, etc. Yeah, excellent. I love that they mentioned Native Construct and Others by No One taking influence from it. Those are some other great bands that I love. Next, we have Animals as Leaders. Yeah, I had to get some instrumental albums on here, and I think they're the best representation of the instrumental progressive metal scene. They're probably the best instrumental progressive metal band. Um, yeah, they mentioned that Liquid Tension Experiment and Scale the Summit did instrumental progressive metal earlier. That's true. But I think Animals as Leaders are leading the charge for sure. So I agree with Loudwire on this. Mastodon Crack the Sky, excellent, excellent album to include here. And I like that the other bands that they're calling out here that Baroness and the Ocean, also great bands. Diablo Swing Orchestra, I'm surprised to see them on this list. They're very quirky, very avant-garde, very fun. I like it. Sigh with Air to Despair. I don't know if I've heard this one, but I've heard a newer album by Psy, and they are very experimental and avant-garde, pretty intensely heavy metal. Wow, they formed in 1989, tapped into extreme and black metal. And they take influence from Japanese and Middle Eastern music. I haven't heard this particular album by them, I don't think, but I'll have to check this out. Sounds very cool. Devin Townsend Empath. Yeah, I love that one. I feel like maybe that was even my album of the year in 2019, if I remember correctly. I think it was. Really good. Devin Townsend, probably one of the best vocalists in progressive metal right now. And this is one of his more adventurous albums. Oh, I guess that's the whole list. So that was my reaction to these History of Prog Metal and 21 albums. Looks like their next article seems interesting too. So maybe I'll react to that too. Best progressive rock and metal album each year since 1983. Yeah, maybe I'll just react to that as my next video. We'll see. Hope you enjoyed this list. What do you think of this list that Loudwire picked out? And are there any that you would add to it, any that you would remove? And stay tuned for my next video. Peace out.